Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-token lovers of liberty. It is Friday, September 2nd, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. All right, we made it to the weekend. So glad to have you here from beautiful, rainy Potland, Oregon. It is certainly turning into fall here in Potland. It has been raining all day. Cool temperatures and just gray as hell. It's getting back to the way we know and love it, isn't it? We got all sorts of stuff to talk about on today's show. Most especially, we are going to go not into radical rant mode, not into epic rant mode, but we're going to go into full-scale mega rant mode. That's right. Today on the show, from half past all the way through the end of hour 2, I'm going to be giving you the epic mega rant of Stoners Against Legalization 2016. It's a 3-part series I've posted up on weednews.co, and I'm going to give you my take on the phenomenon that I've been covering since 2010, since California's Prop 19, and the first time we saw an organized group of marijuana consumers fighting with the cops to keep marijuana illegal. And you know how I feel about that. It's not one of my favorite things. It's bad enough we have to deal with cops and rehabs and drug testers and prison guards and all of these pharmaceutical and alcohol interests that want to keep us criminal for profit. At least you can understand that because they're not on our side. But to have our own people, to have our own cannabis consumers fighting with them to keep us illegal, and oftentimes for the same reason, for profit, is just something I cannot abide. And so we'll give you the full rundown. We're going to talk about California 2010. We'll talk about Washington 2012. We'll talk about Oregon 2014, Ohio 2015, and what's going on in the states this year, California, Arizona, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine, that will be voting on legalization this November. But we've got our regular segments as well coming up on the show in Behind the Headlines. I took a look at these medical websites and how they were reporting on these latest findings from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, and it's very interesting how much they differ from the way the mainstream media reported it. So we'll take a look at that, the Cannabis Focus. In drug war data mining, I took a deeper look at those National Survey on Drug Use and Health numbers to find out, are more people smoking pot lately? And if so, who are they? So we'll bring you those numbers in the drug war data mines. Of course, all of that comes after the Cannabis Radio News. And in our headlines today, we've got a story coming to you from Springfield, Illinois, where the Illinois Supreme Court has fleshed out what the rules are on the new decriminalization law. We'll also give you the update on pot lounges in Denver, Colorado, whether they will be possible or not. We've got another fine for fraud happening out here in Oregon in the Green Rush to tell you about. We've got some accounting data out of Miami-Dade County that'll tell us just how much medical marijuana may contribute to the economy there in Miami-Dade. We've also got hemp CBD update for you, and overseas in Denmark, terrible shooting that's happened in the free town of Christiania. We'll tell you all about that in the news. That's all coming up on the Russ Belville Show. Also want to remind you, coming up on Tuesday, November 8th, we've got our Cannabis Radio News coverage, the Russ Belville Show coverage of Marijuana Election Night 2016. We're setting up some of the infrastructure already. We're even making inquiries to the mainstream media for them to use us as their marijuana vote news source. So we'll tell you how that works out. The Cannabis Radio News is next. Stay tuned. I'm Radical Russ.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Earn your PhD in THC monetization with CannabisRadio.com. Don't be late.
Oh, let the marijuana llama tell you something now about a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow! The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seeds till they bud, put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows large. Put the big celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong. Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is him pink, that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint. The business of cannabis should be no crime. Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana Llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
From high atop Mount Soledad in San Diego, California, 100 feet above sea level. Good morning. It's good news with cannabis nurse Heather.
This plant is amazing. Positive change is happening. We did it. No matter who you are, you can make a positive impact on the world.
I would rather be illegally alive than legally dead.
And that quote helped to give you strength.
Nurse Heather is only on CannabisRadio.com.
Good morning, cannabis nurse Heather.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Your grapefruits are no match for my Trump Towers.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Friday, September 2nd, 2016. Springfield, Illinois. The Illinois Supreme Court has clarified new rules for the state's decriminalization law. The state set the fine for possession of up to 10 grams of marijuana and paraphernalia at $120. Prior to decriminalization, that possession was a Class B misdemeanor with a possible 6 months in jail, while the paraphernalia was a Class A misdemeanor with a possible year in jail. Also included in the rules is authority for court clerks to expunge the records of those who pay their fines, which may be handled by mail without an appearance in court. Illinois is now the 21st state to have decriminalized possession of personal amounts of marijuana. Denver, Colorado. Denver voters will have the opportunity to vote on a ballot measure this November that would allow adults to consume cannabis in regulated, neighborhood-approved consumption spaces. The Denver Elections Division notified proponents Thursday that the petition they submitted on August 12th included more than enough valid signatures of city voters to qualify for the ballot. 4,726 valid signatures were required, and Denver's Neighborhood-Supported Cannabis Consumption Committee collected more than 12,000 total signatures in just 30 days. More than 100 Denver businesses have expressed their support for the initiative, including coffee shops, restaurants, and entertainment venues, and proponents plan to continue securing endorsements from area businesses. The campaign will also be reaching out to all Denver-registered neighborhood organizations and business improvement districts in an effort to ensure all stakeholders have a voice in the process. The initiative would establish the City of Denver Cannabis Consumption Pilot Program, which would create safe, supervised consumption spaces so that adult cannabis consumers can have access to traditional social environments without being segregated from mainstream society. Salem, Oregon. The Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services has issued a $60,000 fine relating to a marijuana-related securities fraud. The Oregonian reports that Todd C. Grange created a sham business called THC Pharmaceuticals and then used it to bilk a Colorado investor out of about $80,000. Grange has a previous conviction for theft in Washington state. This is the second marijuana-related fraud case for which the state has issued fines. In July, the state fined Tisha Seiler $40,000 for false claims she made regarding awarding of state dispensary licenses. Seiler runs the Canacea dispensary in Northeast Portland, but she had claimed to have state approval for others. Seiler has appealed the ruling. Miami, Florida. According to newly released estimates, Miami-Dade County in Florida could reap as much as $124 million annually in medical marijuana sales. Miami New Times reports that the estimates come from a request made by Miami-Dade Commissioner Dennis Moss back in May of 2014. The figures only account for the medical marijuana laws currently in effect in Florida. Only low-THC cannabidiol oil was made legal by Florida's legislature in 2014. High-THC oil was added to the law in 2015 for patients with terminal illnesses. The county also calculates that medical marijuana will create 125 direct jobs, 75 indirect jobs, and 102 construction-related jobs. Floridians will be voting on Question 2 this November, which would create a far more expansive medical marijuana program, generating much more revenue and many more jobs. Portland, Oregon. After years of trying to separate the public's perception of industrial hemp from medical and social uses of cannabis, farmers in Oregon are discovering that a medical use of hemp is boosting their profits. The Oregonian reports that 77 farmers are licensed to grow hemp in Oregon, and they are finding that the extracting of CBD oil from their plants is a much better return on their investment than converting the hemp to food, fuel, or fiber products. Christiania, Denmark. The BBC reports that 2 police officers were shot Wednesday in the semi-autonomous region of Christiania in the city of Copenhagen, Denmark, in a gun battle with drug dealers, leading to residents tearing down their cannabis markets. Christiania was founded 45 years ago by squatters and has become a bohemian neighborhood that largely governs itself. Personal use of cannabis and hash has been mostly tolerated, but residents are wary of the increasing presence of organized drug gangs in their midst. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Friday, September 2nd, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
Forwarding the cause of legalization and research of the growing cannabis industry, one podcast at a time. The Cannabis Radio Network. The cannabis industry is growing, business is booming, and as new opportunities arise in newly legalized states, each market is getting more competitive. Today, it takes more than just being a good grower. Do you have the resources to market and handle this ever-changing business landscape? Let Canna Management Corporation help you grow your canna business with our vast resources and experience to make your business a fully functional service company. Financial management, HR, sales, marketing, efficiency, and more. CMC has the experience and the expertise to improve your business and help you better meet the demands of your clients and customers. Call Canna Management Corporation and let our team get you ready to grow. 415-269-8015. That's 415-269-8015. Or visit canna-management.com.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Russ Belville Show. Chat is for friends 18 and older. We expect our chat to be civil, mature, and free from excessive profanity. If you don't like these rules, there are approximately 6 billion other chat rooms with lower standards that you can visit.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your canna business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your canna business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, I want to take a look at how medical websites are reporting on the latest information that has come from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. There was a report out by the medical journal The Lancet Psychiatry, and they took a look at what has happened since 2002 with reported pot use. And if you're reading the medical sites, you'd think the sky is falling. First, we go to MedPage Today. Their headline, Pot Use Up as Perceived Risk Falls. And here's the lead paragraph. More people in the U.S. are using marijuana as fewer perceive the drug to be harmful, researchers found. Marijuana use rose from 10.4% in 2002 to 13.3% in 2014. At the same time, the proportion of people who perceived great risk of harm from smoking pot once or twice a week fell from about 50% to 33%. Got that? You see, we went and legalized the marijuana, and we went from 1/2 of the people to only 1/3 that are scared of it. And then more people went ahead and smoked it, especially those wake and bake potheads. As they continue saying, the number of users on a daily or near daily basis more than doubled during the study period, from an estimated 3.9 million in 2002 to 8.4 million in 2014. Now, I shouldn't just dismiss MedPage Today because the article was written by Chuck Green, who disclosed a financial relationship with the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer. That probably has nothing to do with it. How about we look at another medical website? Out on Medscape, Megan Brooks writes the headline, More U.S. Adults Using Marijuana as Attitudes Change. And the lead is, with growing legal and social acceptance of marijuana, an increasing number of U.S. adults are using it, and using it more often, new research shows. I went over to Medical News Today and found the headline, Marijuana Use Rising as More People Think It Is Safe. And the lead is, the perception of marijuana use as a harmful drug has reduced among American adults, leading to an increase in its use, according to new research published in The Lancet Psychiatry. All right, so 3 different websites that have made the point that people think marijuana use is less risky and marijuana use has gone up. Oh no, more people are using it. They don't think it's risky anymore. Here's the funny thing about the research. I went and looked it up because you know me. I looked up the research in The Lancet Psychiatry. It wasn't focused on whether more people were using marijuana. It focused on whether or not there's been an increase in problem marijuana use since legalization. Here's the study summary. The study of marijuana use disorders is urgently needed because of increasing marijuana legalization in multiple jurisdictions, the effect of marijuana use on future risk of psychiatric disorders, and the deleterious effects of marijuana exposure. Thus, understanding trends of marijuana use and use disorders and examining factors that might drive these trends, for example, perceptions of harm from marijuana use, is essential. So what the data showed is that despite this increase in marijuana use, the rate of people exhibiting marijuana use disorders has remained virtually the same since 2002. Now, while these medical sites didn't get to it very soon, Christopher Ingraham at the Washington Post, he noted it with his headline, More people are using marijuana, but fewer people are abusing it. Now, to be fair, the 3 medical websites I just talked about did mention the part about there being a stalemate there on the marijuana use disorders, but they didn't get around to it till paragraph 9, paragraph 6, and paragraph 4. They all lead with, oh my God, more people are using pot because they think it's less risky, which wasn't the subject of the study. And even then, when they bother to mention that, these sites are downplaying it. They are trying to downplay it by suggesting that since we've got so many new marijuana smokers, the new marijuana smokers won't have as many problems. So they're bringing down the curve, if you will, which is a dumb argument to make if you're trying to say legalization is going to increase problem use. You just said that more of these users are new and don't have problems. The other thing they're trying to say is, well, this doesn't include homeless people in the survey, and they're more likely to be problem users. Right. Okay. Well, look, nobody should be surprised that more people are smoking pot and think that it's less risky. When we grew up, Ronald Reagan was telling us it was as bad as an A-bomb blast on Bikini Island. So the fact that we know it's medicine now is going to lead more people to want to use it and to think that it's less risky. The fact that there's less marijuana use disorders, even with potent pot, that's the story.
Beer.
All right, well, happy 420 to Sweetgrass, Montana. I looked them up today. I thought that was a pretty cool name for a town. It's up there on the Canadian border. Sweetgrass, 420. I think it all goes together. When we come back, we'll do some drug war data mining and take a look at those numbers of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. If pot smoking's going up, who's doing it? We'll find out.
Next to THC and CBD, you can now add CBR to your cannabis vernacular. CBR as in cannabisradio.com.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be, the Vuber way.
The Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio.
You got me running. You got me hiding. Run, hide, and hide, run any way you want. Let it roll. Yeah. You got me doing what you want me, baby. Girl, what you want me to do. Shut up and do a podcast is what I want you to do. Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
The Tommy Chung Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com, where we don't change our mind on decriminalization during an election year.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Well, as we were discussing in the last segment, the media has been reporting on these numbers from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, and framing the reporting on the assumption here that more people are smoking pot, and my God, that's a bad thing. Well, of course, we know that not to be true, and I want to talk a little bit about this figure of more people smoking pot, because it turns out it's mostly the right people that we want smoking pot. First, let's get to the basics. The National Survey on Drug Use and Health is a survey that's been run by the government in various incarnations since the late 1970s. It's had a lot of changes in definition and data gathering, so its most current form is as of 2002. That's why you're finding a lot of these reports going back to 2002, because before that it was the National Household Survey on Drug Abuse. It was a different kind of survey. So we do, if you're closest apples to apples, you go 2002 and on. Now, one thing we know from the data is that more people are admitting to their regular use of cannabis. Sometimes websites report this as more people are smoking pot, but in truth, all we can really guarantee is more people say they're smoking pot when asked by an anonymous pollster from the federal government about their illegal habits. So they could have been smoking all this time and just keeping it quiet. But the basic numbers we get are these. For all U.S. tokers age 12 and older. In 2002, it was about 6% of Americans toking monthly. By 2008, 2009, which is kind of that benchmark year they say from when dispensaries started really kicking into gear, it got up to about 6.5%. The latest figures, 2013 to 2014, show nearly 8% admitting to monthly marijuana use. So since 2002, that's a relative increase of over a quarter, like 28%. But the thing is, using this data this way kind of covers up what's going on. Another way that they'll look at this is they'll take the state by state data for all tokers age 12 and older. And what they find is that Colorado and Washington have the greatest increases since 2002. Colorado's up 75%, Washington's up 72% in monthly toking by people 12 and older. But oddly enough, in that top 10 list, Georgia and Utah also show up. Georgia was 4th with an increase of 57%. Utah was 10th with an increase of 39.5%, interestingly enough. And when you take a look at all of the states, there's only 2 states in the United States that have lower pot smoking numbers now than they did in 2002, and that's Nebraska and South Dakota. So people almost everywhere in America are smoking pot more often than they did a decade ago. But is this a bad thing? See, again, the problem is when you report on these numbers for people age 12 and older, it conceals the fact that legalization is leading to far more adults smoking pot than teenagers. Look at the top 5 states with the greatest increases in the teenage group, 12 to 17, finds that those top 10 since 2002 were all legalized states, or California, which of course has exceptionally easy access. But if you shift the focus to teen use since legalization occurred, something interesting happens. Colorado and California still show up in the top 5, but the top 10 increases are dominated by prohibition states. Legalized states saw an average year-to-year increase of 6.68%. Prohibition states saw an average increase of 0.87%. And medical marijuana states actually saw a decrease overall of 1.95% over the past year. The average year-to-year increase in monthly teen pot smoking across the country was about 1%. Meanwhile, among the young adults aged 18 to 25, since 2002, we see Colorado with the greatest increase at 44.15%. But again, half the states in the top 10 are prohibition states, with Georgia second to Colorado. And again, if we shift our focus to just what's happened in the past year, Colorado and Washington aren't even the top 10 with the greatest increases for people college age, 18 to 25. Kansas is actually number 4 on the list. Only 9 states saw an increase in past year monthly toking rates among those young adults, and none of those states were legalized states. Colorado actually had a 2% decline, and Washington State had an 11.5% decline. But when we take a look at the ages 26 and older, we see Washington and Colorado with rates that have more than doubled since 2002. And Utah and Georgia almost doubled. Looking at the past year, though, Colorado and Washington don't even make the top 5. So basically what we find is, yes, there are more young people smoking marijuana, but the rate of their increase is so much slower than the rate of the increase of the adult cannabis consumers. Since 2002, nationwide, teen smoking is down 10%. College-age toking is up 12.5%. But for people over the age of 26, since 2002, pot smoking is up 52%. So this idea that we have been liberalizing our marijuana laws by passing medical marijuana, by passing legalization, and that it would send the wrong message to kids, well, the jury's out on that one. But we can say that the right message has been gotten to the adults, and that is with legal access and legal status, they're more likely to use and admit their use of marijuana. All right, we're going to take a break and get ourselves ready for the upcoming Stoners Against Legalization 2016 Mega Rant. Live from Potland, Oregon. We'll be right back after these sponsor messages.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Keep your cannabis cravings under control. Feed your mind with CannabisRadio.com.
Dr. Dabber, hurry! Its temperature is shooting past 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's burning up.
I'm afraid for this little guy, it's just too late.
What caused the problem?
Only Dr. Dabber can maintain the perfect temperature for a smooth-tasting, slower burn. This standard vaporizer lost all of its health benefits, sending it up in smoke.
So you're telling me that most vapor pens burn so hot they produce smoke, not vapor?
Correct. Keep away from those standard vaporizer pens and turn to Dr. Dabber. Doctor's orders.
Less heat, more flavor.
Normal stands for responsible adult cannabis use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those posed by legal drugs. You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
You're going to find really wonderful, well-meaning, well-spoken people, and then people that are just batshit crazy.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
This 2016 election is the most pivotal election in marijuana reform history. A record 9 states will be voting on reform measures. Florida, Arkansas, North Dakota, and Montana will be voting for medical marijuana measures. Most significantly, California, Arizona, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine will be voting for adult marijuana legalization. Well, except for that die-hard group of marijuana activists who will be voting along with the cops, rehabs, drug testers, prison guards, and other opponents of marijuana legalization to defeat these measures. I call them stoners against legalization. This is the 5th election cycle where this phenomenon has reared its ugly head. It's a combination of a few factors. One of them is I got's mine. The people and industries in states with medical marijuana fearing the loss of their market share. Medical marijuana, especially in California, creates the perfect equilibrium for growers and sellers, where marijuana is prohibited enough to remain expensive, but legal enough to avoid prison. Another is it's a trap. The paranoid who believe that legalization is actually a way to manufacture more marijuana arrests. Somehow, when everyone is legal to carry an ounce and grow a few plants, cops will bust more people for over an ounce and too many plants, or driving stoned, or for public toking. And often, they will point to existing crimes that are duplicated in the legalization measure as if they are new additions to the law. For the purists, the point is, it's not true legalization. This is the idea that we should reject some measure of marijuana liberty, because there will still exist some criminal laws on marijuana. For some, legalization only really happens when it's as legal as alcohol. No purchase limits, for instance. For the truly pure, legalization doesn't happen until we treat it like tomatoes. Those people I like to call tilters. Then for some, the problem is, what about the patients? The somewhat legitimate fear that wholesale changes in the way we handle marijuana are going to upset the ability for patients to acquire marijuana in the amount and frequency they need. Nowhere are stoners against legalization more vocal than in California. It gave birth to the movement in 2010, culminating in a no on Prop 19 demonstration in front of Oaksterdam on Election Day. Their primary concern was that Prop 19 was a scheme cooked up by Richard Lee to enrich his Oakland marijuana empire, a monopoly grab that would hike the price of pot and leave others out in the cold. They also complained that the personal grow limits of a 5x5 garden were a trap, because nobody could grow in that small a canopy, so cops would constantly be busting people for overgrowing. Never mind that Richard Lee, a wheelchair-bound paraplegic, had come up from the grassroots and helped supply medical marijuana to thousands of patients. Never mind that his Oaksterdam University contributed a wealth of knowledge that helped foster the top growers in the nation. Never mind that Lee bet almost his entire fortune by putting $1.5 million into the campaign. Nope. To stoners against legalization, Richard Lee was an enemy as reviled as any narcotics cop. The no on Prop 19 people told us it wasn't true legalization. They told us it's a trap designed to help cops arrest tokers. The truth was they had a case of I got's mine, evidenced by the drubbing Prop 19 took in the Emerald Triangle, the commercial marijuana growing counties in California. The stoners against legalization told us that a far better chance at legalization would come around in 2012. Well, now it's 2016, and the far better chance at legalization has finally arrived, only 4 years late. But the stoners against legalization are out again with virtually the same dire predictions as 2010. Grabbing some ink these days is stoner against legalization Steve Cubby. He insists that Prop 64, quote, does not legalize marijuana, end quote, despite it clearly legalizing the possession of an ounce, the home production of 6 plants, the possession of the harvest, the sharing of marijuana with other adults, the purchase of marijuana from stores, and potentially the use of marijuana at private clubs. Cubby complains that Prop 64 creates tougher punishments for people who possess more than an ounce. That's just not true, as the current punishment for possession of over an ounce is a misdemeanor with 6 months, which becomes a felony with 16 months to 3 years if you have intent to deliver. Under Prop 64, the possession penalty is the same, and the intent to deliver penalty drops from a felony to a misdemeanor. In fact, every penalty for marijuana violations under Prop 64 is equal to or less than the current punishment, except one: smoking pot where tobacco is banned, as in a no smoking zone, rises from a $100 to a $250 fine. Now, there is one issue I have a problem with in Prop 64, and that's the addition of a 15% excise tax on marijuana, as well as a $9.25 per ounce harvest tax. And that must be paid by recreational and medical consumers alike. Adding 15% plus $9.25 to a $300 ounce adds about $55 to the cost of that ounce for a patient. However, it's still not a deal breaker for me, because the resulting economy of scale and competition that we will evolve in the cultivation space will drop the price so low that even with additional taxation, marijuana will be far cheaper in a couple of years than it is today. Among Washington State's stoners against legalization in 2012, one of the dire predictions was that marijuana was going to end up costing $600 an ounce. And for a brief time, those kind of prices were realized, as there were too few retailers and too little supply, and that all culminated in $30 grams. But now, as the supply side has worked itself out, we're finding the average retail price for a gram of marijuana is below $10. And that's with the state's highest in the nation 37% excise tax and state and local sales taxes ranging from 6 to 9%. If you're buying at the ounce level, you can find deals for less than $50. As this recreational market expands in California, it has to compete with the rest of the West Coast market that has a 4 and 2 year head start, Washington and Oregon, respectively. If the grow regs and taxes become too onerous in the Emerald Triangle, those growers will move to Southern Oregon. If the prices get too high in Portland, consumers will cross the river into Vancouver, Washington. If recreational pot is too much of a hassle and expense, Californians will just keep renewing their medical recommendations. I think the price of marijuana in California could drop to as low as $150 an ounce after the passage of Prop 64, and the time that it takes to get commercial operations growing. Then, when California in 2020 opens up the mega grow licenses, the prices will drop even further. Even if the ounce price with tax only drops to $250, it's still cheaper than the current menu at Oakland's Harborside Health Center. All right, we'll take a break and continue this rant. Part 2, the Washington debacle. Why what happened with Washington State is no model of prediction for what may happen in California when we return.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
From dabs to chivas, sativas to indicas, we roll out a whole concentrate of fresh new content every week. It's like going from the greenhouse to the dispensary. CannabisRadio.com.
Great websites today need expert web design and development and need to be e-commerce ready and mobile friendly. But building a marketable and profitable website can be an uphill climb. Ready to make your new website or replace your existing website? Think Orange as the new way to get in the black. Orange Hill Development works with Fortune 500 companies and offer the same top quality development service at a fraction of what other providers charge. Brands like Absolute, Carlsberg, and Nestea trust Orange Hill Development. Find out why you should trust your website with Orange Hill. Contact Orange Hill for a consultation today at orangehilldevelopment.com. Doc Rob, the concierge for better living.
My guests say Razzie Berry. We're talking about nature, naturopathic medicine, as well as the concept of prevention and preventing disease.
Empower people to live a naturopathic lifestyle, get to know your body, understand its rhythms, remove toxins, and use natural alternatives whenever possible. 90 to 95% of cancers are due to environment and lifestyle risk factors. I mean, that's a huge number. That means that cancer is preventable.
The concierge for better living with Doc Rob. Only on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at RadicalRuss.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Californians defeated Prop 19 in 2010, thanks in some measure to the Stoners Against Legalization, who claimed it wasn't true legalization, but merely a scheme to enrich Oakland marijuana heavyweights and a conspiracy to manufacture even more marijuana arrests. In 2012, a then record 3 states stepped up to try marijuana legalization: Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. And once again, the Stoners Against Legalization stood up with cops, rehabs, drug testers, and prison guards to oppose the measure. Oregon mostly managed to avoid opposition to its Measure 80 among the cannabis community. There was some grousing about minor details, but generally the community was happy with the measure. That's because Measure 80 was the continuation of the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act that had been perennially proposed by a local medical marijuana clinic tycoon, and it was extremely generous and lax in its regulation of commercial cannabis. It was also the only one of the 3 initiatives that year to lose at the ballot. While Colorado and Washington both won their elections with 55% of the vote, Oregon lost its election with only 46.5%. Oregon's measure was the closest yet to the true legalization that Stoners Against Legalization are always yammering about, but the lesson of its electoral defeat is lost on them. Colorado had a bit more noise from the Stoners Against Legalization, but it was largely confined to Facebook among the tilters, the treat it like tomatoes people, who have little effect or influence on the debate. Nobody living in reality believes there's any shot in hell at getting a majority of voters to treat a mind-altering substance like we would a common backyard garden vegetable. But Washington State? That's where Stoners Against Legalization took the next step and became an actual organized opposition campaign. As Washington State pursued its legalization plan, Initiative 502, there arose an opposition campaign called No on I-502, funded by some medical marijuana providers. For the remainder of the I-502 campaign, the blue t-shirt clad I-502 supporters, often led by PBS travel celebrity Rick Steves, would be hounded by the red t-shirt clad I-502 opponents. Without much funding or events of their own to promote, No on I-502 was left to just show up at the Yes on I-502 events, heckle their speakers, and try to block their yes signs with no signs. Their tactics backfired and I-502 passed with a strong majority. The general public was not amused by their rude interruptions. Many voters who had grown weary of the liberties taken by medical marijuana supporters figured that if those people were so virulently against I-502, it must be something good. Many of the scary predictions made by No on I-502 failed to materialize. They warned that marijuana would end up costing $600 an ounce. While some initial problems with supply did lead to high prices, there now exists in Washington some of the lowest marijuana prices in the nation, below $10 a gram retail and below $3 a gram wholesale. They warned that the new 5 nanogram per se DUID, the driving under the influence of drugs statute, would mean that possession arrests would just be replaced by DUID arrests. By 2014, not only did possession arrests drop from a few thousand to a few dozen, since over an ounce is still illegal, but overall DUI arrests dropped 18%. Washington State Patrol does show that in 2014, there were over 6,000 DUIs sent to the lab, with 28% coming back hot for THC, or over 1,700 positives. But of those, only 44% were above 5 nanograms, or 773 that got per se DUID convictions. That means 983 of the THC positives were under the limit and not a DUID. Compare that to pre-legalization in 2012. There were about 5,300 DUIs sent to the lab that year, with 18.6% coming back hot for THC, or 985 THC positives. Every one of those 985 defendants were subject to a DUID charge, since there was no under-the-limit number back then. The per se DUID statute is still unscientific and arbitrary, but it hasn't led to dramatically more tokers getting DUID convictions. The scariest prediction from No on I-502 was that passing I-502 would mean the end of medical marijuana. And indeed, medical marijuana has undergone some drastic changes in Washington State. But blaming the demise of Washington medical marijuana on I-502 is like invading Iraq over 9/11. It's targeting the wrong enemy. The No on I-502 people are now the ones loudly ringing the bell in California to rally opposition to Prop 64, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, that would legalize marijuana in the Golden State. We told everybody I-502 would destroy medical marijuana, and it did, goes the cry. Don't make the same mistake we made by passing Prop 64. But holding Washington State up as an example of what could happen if you pass legalization is like holding up Charlie Sheen as an example of what could happen if you tried acting. Washington State has had one of the most dysfunctional medical marijuana programs in America since the beginning. It originally had no possession or cultivation limits. Instead, just a limit of a 60-day supply. Every grower, patient, and sheriff decided what exactly that was, leading to huge farms and lots of out-of-state diversion of cannabis. Eventually, they held hearings to decide what a 60-day supply would be, with advocates initially calling for 4.5 pounds of cannabis. That got whittled down by the legislature to 1.5 pounds and 15 plants. Washington also had no medical marijuana registry. Your qualification for medical marijuana there had no state oversight. It was merely your doctor's signature on a piece of paper. Soon, the power to recommend medical marijuana was extended to naturopaths and nurse practitioners. This, of course, led to younger and healthier people getting their medical marijuana recs, culminating in a news expose of a tent at the Seattle Hemp Fest where young men were lined up to pay $40 for their medical marijuana letter before they gathered to smoke pot at the main stage for the Cottonmouth Kings concert. Most problematic is that there were no provisions for dispensaries, but there was an allowance for someone to be a, quote, caregiver for one patient at a time, end quote. That was intended to allow someone to care for a sick friend or a relative. But that soon evolved into storefronts, supplied by those huge 60-day supply farms, staffed by clerks tending glass cabinets stocked with copious amounts of cannabis, who were playing caregivers to the customers, lined up to be one patient at a time. Seriously, the clerk would have the next patient in line sign a form saying the clerk was their caregiver, sell the patient some buds, then sign off that the clerk was no longer the caregiver so that the next person in line could be. So as I-502 passed, it put a well-regulated, inspected, taxed system of recreational cannabis alongside an unregulated, uninspected, untaxed system of medical marijuana. This led to the legislature crafting Senate Bill 5052, which has ended the practice of unlicensed storefront dispensaries, created a voluntary patient registry, and reduced possession limits to just 6 plants and 3 ounces. For the California voter, the tale of Washington State may be frightening. Just like Washington, California has seen its share of unregulated medical marijuana shenanigans. But unlike Washington, California's legislature has dealt with the regulatory problems before moving on to legalization, though the recent passage of laws that finally provide statewide medical marijuana consistency. The No on I-502 people misdirect their anger at the passage of legalization when it was the loosely regulated medical marijuana system itself that brought on the attention of the legislature. There are 2 examples that make this abundantly clear. The negative example is Montana. There, they had a loosely regulated medical marijuana system too, that led to the expansion of unauthorized storefront dispensaries, easily obtained medical marijuana recommendations by healthy people, and painfully obvious out-of-state diversion. So in 2011, their legislature called for a complete repeal of medical marijuana, only to be saved by the governor's veto. In the wake of the veto, they passed a bill far more detrimental than Washington's SB 5052. Montana's bill explicitly ended the dispensaries by allowing caregivers only 3 patients max. They ended the loose recommendations by auditing any doctor who made more than 25 of them per year. After a failed veto referendum in 2012 and numerous court battles, those restrictions went into effect on Wednesday. But they didn't legalize marijuana in Montana, though. It was the legislature fed up with commercial medical marijuana operators flouting the law. The same fate awaited Washington's medical marijuana, as their legislator was already concocting the policies that would eventually become SB 5052. Now, the positive example is Oregon. There, they had a well-regulated medical marijuana system with a mandatory patient registry. Possession and plant counts were clearly defined, starting at 1 ounce and 3 mature plants. Only doctors could write recommendations, and the state required review of patients' medical records to determine a legitimate claim for medical use. Oregon's operators, for the most part, complied with medical marijuana regulations. Where difficulties arose, such as possession limits being too low, activists educated lawmakers to understand the needs of patients, and legislators then passed larger allowances of 1.5 pounds and 2 dozen plants. When some actors took advantage of those greater limits and started forming unauthorized dispensaries based on the caregiver loophole, the best operators invited lawmakers in for tours to see how a well-regulated set of safe medical marijuana access points could function. Through more negotiation with activists, the legislature passed a dispensary law in 2013. They did legalize marijuana in Oregon, but observers agree that the state has done a far better job integrating medical marijuana into the new system. The legislature did make some bad decisions, like allowing the eastern half of the state to opt out of both medical and recreational businesses without a public vote. They tackled some of the worst abuses of medical growers by setting caps on total plants per property, but even then kept those caps at 4 dozen plants in non-residential areas and 12 in residential areas. So we have Washington state medical marijuana, which had much in common with both Montana and Oregon, suffering a fate more like non-legalized Montana than legalized Oregon. The lesson for California isn't in Washington, where medical marijuana continued as an unregulated mess as legalization overtook it. The lesson for California is that it did the right thing, like Oregon did, in getting its medical marijuana loopholes closed up before moving on to passing marijuana legalization. Now, there's a bit of an update on this piece as I received some comments after I posted it from Dominic Corva, who's a great activist up there in Washington State. He wanted to point out that the legislature did try to address these medical marijuana problems in Washington State. They had passed a comprehensive bill to create dispensaries that was then line item vetoed by then Washington Governor Christine Gregoire. She was afraid of all the threats from the federal government that if the state was to allow people or was to sanction such dispensaries, that she'd be creating a situation where state employees would have to violate federal law. As we found in the other states that have legalized these dispensaries, those threats were empty threats, but they did lead to there not being any sort of solution for the unregulated dispensaries. Later, a couple years later, there was a bill from Senator Ann Rivers to also try to fix this problem, but there were revenue issues where the Washington legislature could not decide who or what or how was going to pay for the different parts of regulating these systems. So while there was a dysfunctionality to be blamed in Washington state with its medical marijuana program, we also have to look at the dysfunctionality of its legislature and its inability to come to any sort of regulatory scheme to handle Washington state before I-502 managed to pass and legalize. This is a kind of a shot across the bow, if you will, to other states where legalization is likely to be on the ballot soon. If not in this 2016 election, for the states that are moving forward, it would be a good idea to get your medical marijuana in order before you start trying to pass legalization. And as far as I'm concerned, for a lot of the states, it'd be a better idea to just go straight to legalization and bypass medical marijuana altogether. I'm tired of us being separated by our health conditions. I liked the days when we were all pot smokers and we all fought for each other. Let's get back to that, can we? That's all the time we got for Hour 1, but stay tuned. Hour 2 is next. We'll wrap up this mega rant with a look at the other states, the 4 states where Marijuana Policy Project has legalization on the ballot, and what have the stoners against legalization been doing in those states? For everyone here at CannabisRadio.com, I'm Radical Russ, live from Potland, Oregon. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down